and they had to be approved by the parent body Leong San Tong. Trustees Leong San Tong also managed the Kong Hok Kiong, the Kuan Yin Temple Yang Tong. Oddly enough, the Leong San Tong in Hokkien Temple is located in the Cantonese section of Yang Tong, Chinatown. Unlike the Kong Hok Kiong Hokkien Temple, which is in the Hokkien area. How the trustees acquired the land on which the temple is erected is not very clear. According to a source, the land was leased from the British government for 50 years. The date commencing from 1894, with the option of the trustees extending it for another 25 years. If that is correct, the lease would have elapsed in 1969, even if it is renewed. Our visit, which was mainly a social one, did not give us the opportunity to discuss this and many other matters. We discovered that in fact, we share many common values and traditions. Firstly, in the early days, to help clansmen who need assistance financially or otherwise, because as the number of new immigrants is today practically nil. Today, very few clansmen settled down in Yangon, I believe. We worship the same patron saints, Tosaya and Aung Sun Ya. We have similar objectives of promoting Confucian values of filial piety and ancestral worship. We give emphasis on education and scholarship. In ancient China, all parents have the hope that their children will be successful in the imperial examinations, which, however, was abolished in 1905. The emphasis in education persists to this day, as evidenced by the plaques of scholars who graduated from the various universities around the world. And again, the observance of traditions handed down by our fathers, such as annual worship of ancestors and the celebration of the birthday of our patron saints. As I mentioned earlier, a more detailed study of the Leong San Tong Fu Gongsi in Yangon is necessary, as there were several important issues which have to be clarified. Among them, the temple land, the reason for both the Chan and Ku clan to have joint management of the temple. Some impressions which I had about the visit is that although the exterior of the Gongsi is not as opulent as the one in Penang, the interior is impressive with its gilded wooden panels and intricate stone carvings, similar as the ones in Penang. On the whole, it was a very stimulating visit, as we experienced a strong sense of kinship, and hope that reciprocal visits will further strengthen the bond between us. Thank you.
Thank you, Tan Sri. And to sort of round off, we, as a very Chinese preoccupation, basically, what of the future of this, both these associations, and what are the maybe common goals that both organizations can work towards in the future. I think at the end of the day, we had a discussion about this, and we found out that strengthening awareness about that imagined or shared common ancestors amongst the youth, both in Yangon and in Penang, is vital to continue this tradition going. There are obviously some business and trade opportunities that exist on the various levels that should be continued. And I think that one way is actually an active civic participation, which Datuk Sri himself embodies in all his work in Penang. we both felt that the visit was a first step in renewing ties between Penang and Yangon at the people's level. And perhaps Sri, you might consider even assisting the Yangon Heritage Trust in doing one or two projects, getting maybe even the Ku Kongsi there to start thinking about heritage in a different way. After all, the Ku Kongsi here has shown that taking active steps in restoring their clan house and providing heritage interpretation at a particular level has been very helpful. And maybe Yangon can sort of re-inspire the Ku Kongsi here to show how Kongsis with their provision of community housing and welfare could be one way forward. So having said all that, I thank all of you again, and if you have any questions, you welcome questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Neil. Thank you, Neil. And just a couple comments, and then I'll ask questions. But I think Don Momo showed, a presentation that I think in Penang that a lot of people can relate to about the kind of speed at which it's difficult to underestimate in Yangon the speed at which heritage buildings are engaged. The opening up of Burma, the influx of economic investment. I think that the need for people to find hotel accommodation and business opportunities. People want to build very, very quickly. And I think having examples of cities in the region like Penang and Singapore in some cases, maybe more in recent years, but that have managed to integrate heritage values into a broader city plan and economic opportunities for the country would be good. And I think Penang provides a good model for that. And I think that in terms of the Ku Kongsi, I think you're absolutely right. It would be great to see how the Kongsis can participate in a broader dialogue on how to contribute to the broader community in terms of heritage issues, not only for the restoration of clan houses, but houses and the neighborhoods around the Kongsi themselves. So I'll open up the floor to questions from the audience.
Just a question.
Could each of you who ask questions please identify yourself so that those who may not know you.
Sorry, my name is Marcus Langdon. I'm living here in Penang. And my special area of interest is East India, currently Penang. So it's quite common knowledge that the Ku Kongsi is a very wealthy Kongsi and owns a large number of properties throughout the town, which is very good for the heritage preservation here. Is that the case in Yangon as well?
No, unfortunately, you see, I think they are not so affluent as we in Penang. I made to believe that the source of income depends mostly from donations and contributions from the clansmen, and also from the rental collected from the vendors outside the temple.
So the Kongsi itself doesn't own other properties in Yangon?
As far as I know, I don't think they do. But as I've said, you see, I think we need to engage them in more dialogues. You see. We were there for about 2 hours, but then at the Kongsi, you see, and they were also very hospitable. They gave a dinner in our honor, but we couldn't, discuss about serious matters, as most of the time they tried to get us drunk.
I just had a question for the heritage buildings for the first one. The heritage buildings that are being identified, are they just the colonial official buildings, or do you include ethnic minority buildings too? For example, the buildings in Chinatown, are they considered for preservation as well?
The list by government or the list by us?
at least by you?
Yes, including our preliminary survey is everything over 50 years.
Okay, so it's this blanket including page.
Yes. Can you introduce yourself, please?
I'm Kim Hong, Yangon Heritage Trust. Now, you have listed out that you have had, or you have planned, I wouldn't know, a few study on Chinatown in Yangon in collaboration with Hong Kong University graduate programs. Could you enlighten us on the progress of it? Have you launched it?
It will be coming March.
Coming March,
The
next
students-
March.
Yes,
Okay.
students will.
What about the scope of the research? Could you tell us much of that?
This research will be a part of the academic exercise by the ACP of Hong Kong University. I think the research design will be done by them. They haven't.
So the graduates from Hong Kong Uni will be doing the field work together with your...
Yes,
your-
two graduates will come.
Two, isn't it?
Two will come to help us before the field study. The field studies are the graduate students, graduate studies students. I think about 20 will come in March.
Because what impresses me most is what they are going to do. My understanding of the Chinatown in Yangon may be very sketchy, but I do understand that there are some old clan houses, temples in particular in Yangon itself. And referring to what Dr. Koo has just spoken, there are actually two Guanyin temples in Yangon, not only one. There are two. One belonging to the Cantonese, one belonging to the Hokkiens. So that makes a difference. And in fact, my interest in the Yangon Chinese started with my research interest in the secret societies in Penang, branches of the Gihins and Kentik in Yangon.
I think the students.
Yeah, because I was under the impression that the Kentik in Yangon started by the Koos, like what they did in Penang. But it was just the otherwise. It was not by the Koos anyway. But the Koos had long been in Yangon long before 1755, as far as I know. Perhaps the Yangon Heritage Trust and Hong Kong Uni could look into this very issue of Penang's linkage with Yangon in terms of the broad context of Chinese social structure, especially the clan houses, the temples, the hierarchy of leadership and whatnot. The connection between these two. I do believe that there had been some close relationship between the Gihins in Penang and the Gihins in Yangon. Although that in Yangon started very much later, so was the Kentik, But you find that this is something to which we would very much like to look at, and hopefully the Heritage Trust in Yangon could come up with something that would be more revealing in time to come. Thank you.
I think maybe are there any more questions? Because we are almost 5 minutes left at the time. So just want to... Oh, yeah, you want to start.
I think Kim Hong, you've done us a good turn by raising these connections. And I think one way that we need to support the YHT is if historians like yourself or others here can assist in the writing up of this provision of some research work in this area to support the YHT, particularly if your special interest is in Chinatown in Yangon. And secondly, in PhD and some of the people here have been working out on, say, the baseline study work in Georgetown and other things. And this is where, again, Penang can assist YHT by providing your expertise in, say, coming out the proper terms of reference or sharing your experience with regards to heritage management plans.
Yes, absolutely agree, and thank you for your literature and the culture of mapping. I'm sure is part of it.
And just to support that, I have to say that Yangon Heritage Trust has a lot to do at the moment.
Yes.
And any support from the outside, especially from Penang and these issues, these very important issues about these kinds of connections would be, I think, very much appreciated. Okay. I was wondering, Kusama and Glenn, whether you had any advice, having been so involved in heritage activism from the very beginning, and seeing Domomo's presentation and the kinds of challenges that Yangon is facing at the moment from a very kind of grassroots organizational perspective.
A lot of advice. Well, we will discuss it.
Okay.
I'd just like to say that you've been very brave to set up, because Penang Heritage Trust is 25 years old, and really the most trying times have been since 2008. This has been escalated high-rise numbers. You're starting at that point, and so you really do have an uphill struggle, so we'll give you all the help we can.
Thank you. Okay, so with that, I think we'll bring the first panel to a close and take a coffee break. And we'll convene at 11:30.
Yangon Penang interactions in the 19th and early 20th centuries, and it gives me very great pleasure to introduce two colleagues and friends who are better qualified to speak on this than anyone I know. I'm very pleased to introduce Dr. Ahmad, who's currently visiting research fellow at the Institute for Advanced Study of Asia at Tokyo University, and Dr. Sunil of the University of California at Berkeley. Each of them will speak for about 20 minutes, and then we'll have lots of time for discussion and questions. So, Atsuko, thank you very much.
Thank you for inviting me to start. Much of the preceding literature on British imperial medicine examines colonial discourse within the framework of individual colonial states and their national successors in the late 19th to the 20th centuries. There has been less attention paid to earlier imperial medicine that had to come to grips for the purposes of the army, the company, or other interests with vague, poorly defined, and changing political geographies. The early imperial medical discourse in the Bay of Northam and the Straits, which was sometimes considered for inclusion together into the same colony, but ultimately were not forced within such a setting in which disease health and medical practices had to be categorized and understood across varied regional and cultural zones, rather than within national grids. In this paper, I will examine medical doctors' reports from these three national areas from the early 19th century and explore their connections, their writings on common diseases, and etc. I'm trying to put these two areas in this colonial medical discourses, early colonial medical discourses on medicine. Army doctors were really the first group of medical intelligence gatherers on the streets and Peninsula. 19th century doctors' memoirs often described military surgeons as one of the most important roles for the life of the army soldiers. As James Amrith explains, quote, "The army doctor has a safety of thousands committed to him in the most perilous situations in an unhealthy climate and in the midst of danger. He is to act alone and unassisted in cases where decision and perfect knowledge are required." Army doctors in the 1820s compared Nasrin and Penang not with India but with Burma because of the experience of First Anglo-Burmese War, and like other doctors in India were inclined to associate illness with particular populations. Death and illness from the Burma campaign from diseases was blamed on the dietary, religion, geographical factors. For example, the assistant surgeon J.P. Grant of the Madras establishment, writing in the late 1820s, claimed that had the diet of the native Sikh troops been more attended, quote, diet of the native Sikh troops being more attended to during the Burmese War, the Honorable Company would not have lost a third of the native troops that they did, unquote, which resulted in death and lost limbs and was thus costly for the pensions the company then had to pay. Different beliefs and diet meant that Muslims suffered less than Hindus because Muslims were willing to eat beef, and he blamed a considerable number of deaths and illnesses on the poor state of the Burmese roads, especially during the monsoons. For Grant, if one was not acclimatized to the local area, they would become ill, and hence he recommended that if native troops were brought from India to be stationed in the Straits and Tenasserim, that troops from the Malabar post should be preferred because this was most similar to Tenasserim, and the bodies of local soldiers would be accustomed to this kind of climate. The importance of the relationship between climate and health was increasingly asserted by other doctors of his generation who were influenced by miasma theory, which connected disease to climate rather than to physical contact, which would be the basis of the contagion theories later. As elsewhere, discussions of health in Tenasserim and the Strait from the 1820s leaned heavily towards miasma theory, and doctors identified healthy and unhealthy climate that were perceived as having a huge impact on the health of the troops. A big part of that were perceived as having a big part of stationing troops in the extended strait was thus constructing a medical topography for the first time. As company army doctor complained regarding Penang and Tenasserim in the 1820s, the diseases peculiar to the tropical climate and effective treatments against them have been little studied. Thus, the gathering of what we might call medical intelligence was viewed as enormously important and as a justifiable expense by the company. The loss of so many British and native soldiers to disease in the First Anglo-Burmese War had clearly underscored the necessity for medical inquiry into the diseases prevalent in a hot climate. The First Anglo-Burmese War experience, however, helped to provide a more nuanced and very healthy perspectives on the straits. By contrast to the disease-ridden jungles of Arakan, the western part of Burma, and the Burmese Delta, Tenasserim and the Straits seemed remarkably healthy. As John Crawford recorded in his diary in 1827, quote, "I have not indeed heard of any spot or place in our southern provinces, Tenasserim Strait, remarkable for the existence of concentrated miasma, the source of those malignant-remittent fevers and dysenteries, which are endemic in many parts of India." The regular stationing of company troops in the Straits and Tenasserim meant that there was a need for a more comprehensive and systematic approach to the health topography of the Straits and Tenasserim, rather than the one of qualitative assessments available in the late 1820s. This more comprehensive and quantitative approach will soon be afforded by new statistical innovators who are undertaking new work in Calcutta and London. For the first decade or so of the stationing of troops in the area, the generalist regional view was built on the basis of unsystematized local reports. This situation was increasingly incompatible with a growing sense that Tenasserim and Strait had a kind of unity, at least by contrast to peninsular India. This came in part from administrative unity and familiarity. Tenasserim, like Arakan, had been taken from Burma under the term of Yandabo in 1826, while Arakan was placed immediately under the presidency of Bengal. Tenasserim remained under the Governor-General of the East Indian Company until 1834, until it was handed over to Bengal. However, up until 1843, it was actually under the charge of officers of Penang who had, quote, no personal experience of administration in India. These included Manji and Rundle in the early 1840s. In reality then, this This area formed a de facto political zone until 1843 and during the period of Dr. Amrith's research. But unity also came from the positioning of Indian troops, which provided a significant institutional fabric to hold these places together. Although Tenasserim was occupied by troops of Madras, Penang, Malacca, and Singapore were first garrisoned by troops from the Bengal Presidency, but later also became stations for Madras troops. Because of the ways that the Madras troops were ultimately stationed around the Bay of Martaban, Penang, Tenasserim, even for a while, Rangoon and Prawn. For example, the same army doctors would be circulated throughout the area. As Grant complained in the 1831, because of the stationing of the troops, he had to spend 5 years at various medical charges of the area at Rangoon, Prawn, Penang, and Tenasserim Post, serving 5 native residents at the General Hospital to Penang and to Boyd. This stationing was reduced to just Tenasserim Street within a few years after the Treaty of Yandabo, when the British withdrew from the lower Burma Delta and stationed fewer troops in Tenasserim and Straits. There were 2 related scientific projects coming from Britain and the other from India that collaborated in the framing of the extended straits on the basis of medical statistics and the military. The first effort was that of Alexander Murray Tuller, and at the War Board, who was putting together vital statistics for the British military on the basis of their documentation and reports, but had not examined India yet. At the same time, in India, James Annesley became interested in statistics in 1822 when the commander of the Madras Army, a man who later commanded the British forces in the First Anglo-Burmese War, Sir Alexander Campbell, provided him with a copy of a set of tables of medical returns which had been compiled by the Madras Medical Board from the public records, which they had in their office. On this basis, he put together a statistical sketch of the prevalent diseases at different army stations over the period of from 1815 to 1821. In 1828, the Medical Board of Madras complained to the government of India that there was a defective state of knowledge existing upon some of the diseases in India. Annesley was appointed to go over the old medical records to identify cases of diseases in India that shed light of the nature of Indian diseases. Annesley remained convinced that the collection of statistics was one of the things missing in the fight against diseases in India. So he began collecting statistics again as a member of the medical board. This office gave him special access to the records. That this research led to the publication of a digest of the medical reports covering the years 1786 to 1829. Annesley continued this work from 1829 to 38 when he retired. When he returned to England in May 1838, he planned to publish these reports in a second edition of his book,